Our first reader tonight is Darcy Parker Bruce. Darcy is a playwright and educator from New London, Connecticut, and a graduate of the MFA playwriting program at Smith College. They're currently commissioned by Chester Theatre Company and Acadiana Repertory Theater, and their play, The Place That Made You, the second installment in the Piedmont Cycle and a 2020 BAPF finalist, will receive 3 premiere productions in the coming 2021 season. And you can find their work on New Play Exchange. And I'll post the link to that in the chat. All right, Darcy, welcome.
Thank you. It's just great to be here. Thank you so much. I'm psyched to be in this room. I just want to introduce my scene partner, Pete, who's going to help me out by reading. I am not an actor by nature, but I'm going to do my very best tonight. We're going to read a scene from a play that's part of a cycle. So this is the 3rd play in the Piedmont Cycle. It's titled The Kingdom of Ghosts. And I want to read from Scene 2, Act 2. So this is the 3rd play in a cycle about small town America. A lot of things happen. I wrote this year, sort of just because it was what came next, and then also as a kind of a reaction to everything that was happening. So I guess what you need to know is that Ben, who we meet in the first play, Soldier Poet, is the ghost of an American Army Ranger. And Ben runs into their friend Connor, also a ghost, at a bar in the afterlife, which is known in this play as the Kingdom of Ghosts. So yeah, I think we'll just jump into it. So 1 second to bring it up. So scene 2, a soldier, a patriot, and a terrorist walk into a bar. Ben opens the door to a bar, looks around.
Anyone in here got a light?
Oh my God, bro.
Sorry, wrong door.
So not the wrong door. Come here, you giant son of a bitch.
Have you been at this bar since?
Hey man, it's always happy hour. You want a drink, my friend?
I've been looking for the heart of America. This it?
Nah, this is just a titty bar 4 miles away from the airport.
Bars are open?
I mean, this one is.
No masks?
We're in the kingdom. I think they just set the year back. Have a drink, would you?
You know, Amara said we didn't fuck it up, but I think she was wrong. Feels like we fucked it all up, doesn't it?
Just a little, yeah.
You know, I've had a lot of time to think.
A little time to drink.
And when I'm drinking, I'm thinking. And it's kind of a wild thought, but...
Try me, Ranger.
I've been thinking a little bit about this girl I know.
Yeah, what's she like?
I've been thinking about something she said.
Around a mouthful of...
Stop.
Go on.
She said this thing about America.
Oh, yeah?
Someone should tell America her dream is a lie. Do you think that's true?
Connor signals for another beer. Let me tell you a story. So I'm in this bar in Berlin. It's called like Das Boot or something extra touristy. It's meant to appeal to out-of-towners, right? But I like places like that. I like local places too, don't get me wrong, but tourist traps, you get all sorts, right? In military and a tourist bar, I mean, you can't get closer to God unless you are, of course, an American military. With an accent like mine, then of course you have a perfect equation and an opportunity to not only get very well and truly laid, but also very well and truly wasted. And Ben, you know me, I never like to waste an opportunity, and especially not if it's on someone else's dime. So what was I supposed to do? I'm in this bar in Berlin, the Das Boot, let's call it, and I meet this fella on my way to the bathroom, and he just kind of takes me in the way you take in strangers when you're drunk. And I've got to piss, but he's not a small man, and he's blocking the tiny door to the tiny bathroom. So I'm standing there dancing, and after he takes me in, he takes a long pull of his beer, and he kind of narrows his eyes, and in a pretty heavy accent, I'm going to place somewhere north of Berlin, he tells me matter-of-factly, I have a joke for you. Right on, I say, because I too am drunk, and also I really have to piss, right? So right on, I say, and he kind of chuckles at me like I'm exactly what he expected. Like he's been sat here in this tourist trap bar 5 miles from the airport for years, waiting for the exact right American to tell this joke to, and lucky me, I fit the bill. He chuckles like I'm exactly what he expected, and he leans in, and his breath does not smell excellent. In fact, it smells like herrings, and he kind of whispers into me, so a soldier, a patriot, and a terrorist walk into a bar, and the bartender looks up and says, what'll it be for the American? And he just about pees himself laughing, like, gotcha, haha, gotcha, Americana. And I'm just like, that's great, fella. And I push by and finally drain the snake, as it were. But I keep thinking about that stupid joke, like, what's so funny about Americans? But I guess if you're out there living outside of America, it's probably pretty hard for you to stand it, right?
Stand what?
How great we have it as Americans.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you a little secret too. I'm from the heart of America, right? The heartland, as we call her. It's my job to keep it light and fun, and you know why? Because everything's got to be good in the heart. America, she doesn't want any trouble. Don't have any trouble if everything's all right at the heart.
But is it?
Connor knocks back his drink. Nice and easy, big boy, nice and easy.
I think there's something we're not getting, don't you? It's like it's right in front of us, but we still can't see it. Know what I mean?
What is it you're looking for? What do you want?
I want everything.
As Ben tells Connor what they want, they begin to emit light and energy. The air around them seems to break, and the shades in the orchestral pit begin to feel a little strange. Maybe they try to play music, but realize it's already coming from somewhere else. As Ben speaks, Emily finally finding her feet on the shores of Acheron, looking for Samir, finding only sand and water.
I want it all. I want my own family, and I want light that never goes out, and I want flowers that bloom all year just for me, and a bed with someone else in it, maybe more than one someone else, and I want to touch something, anything, someone. I want to feel alive. I want to feel so alive I could just reach out.
The shades approach Emily, who watches them with caution. They begin to reach out to her to stroke her hair and cup her face gently in their hands. Emily is nervous, but they seem kind.
I could just reach out and touch them, just feel their life, because Connor, I feel empty. I feel like I'll never love again. I feel so sad. I feel like everything I have has been taken away from me. Like, I feel like I died and nobody noticed.
I'll drink to that.
I gotta get out of here. This place is making me feel claustrophobic.
Ben throws back the rest of her drink. She heads to the door of the bar. Behind her, Connor pulls his mask back on. He grabs a refill before following Ben. Here, man, grabbed you one too.
Cheers.
Wait, gotta smoke?
Always.
Ben slides one out of a beat-up pack for Connor, lights it, takes a big drag before...
Hey.
Ben passes a cigarette.
I've got your 6.
I know.
Fathoms above.
In depths below. They open the door to the bar, and the bar is gone. End of sample. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Darcy. That was great. And I assume written recently since it has maths in it. So thank you for sharing new work with us. That's one of the things that I might ask you all in the Q&A is about whether you're writing about now. Okay. Simon, I am inevitably going to mispronounce the name of the city where you were born. Would you like to pronounce it for me?
Tianjin.
Tianjin?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Close. That's close. Simon Han was born in Tianjin, China, and raised in various cities in Texas. His stories and essays have appeared in The Atlantic, The Texas Observer, Guernica, The Iowa Review, Electric Literature, and Lit Hub. The recipient of several fiction awards and arts fellowships, he lives in Carrollton, Texas. And his new book, Night When Nothing Happened, is very recently out, right?
Yeah, this week.
Oh, this week. Wow. Yeah, congratulations. That's really exciting. If only we were in person and had champagne. Anyway, thank you. Welcome, Simon. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Leah. Thanks for having me. I miss Sewanee. I miss hiking and miss being with the community there. So I'm gonna read a little bit from my novel, and I think all you need to know for this excerpt. So it takes place in 2003, and it's in the perspective of an 11-year-old boy who suspects his little sister of sleepwalking. All right. Even after that first night, he discovered Annabelle in the bathroom. Jack could not say for certain that she was a sleepwalker. People had walked at all hours in Tianjin, the ceiling thumping at 3 a.m. while a drunk bathed the street in song. Aside from the annual fireworks displays or the occasional air raid drills, the night's movements had not stirred him, let alone called to him. Hearing the opening salvo of his grandparents snoring from the other room was assurance that he could close his eyes. Only here in Plano, Texas, had he come to know about sleepwalkers. He imagined them as the zombies in the Walking Dead comics, who weren't called zombies, just walkers. He hadn't thought about where sleepwalkers went after the walking ceased. A sleepwalker who wasn't walking was simply sleeping. But Annabelle had started at one place and ended at another, and there was a story of the in between that he wanted to learn, a story available only to him, not even to Annabelle. Late August and early September were the long days of learning. The locker-lined walls of Fillmore Middle School penned him in while his sister's school, Plano Star Care, shuttled its students on field trips, ambitious even for the gifted. During her third week of kindergarten, after a visit to the JFK Assassination Museum, Annabelle used a word she never used before: fascinating. They got video, she told their mother as the two of them sat at the kitchen table, tearing the ends off green beans. Fascinating. In the adjoining living room, the TV in front of Jack announced the latest scandal in the Catholic Church. Numbers were thrown out: 12, 84, 552. These were scary numbers, the steely-eyed commentator stated. Before the commercial break, she promised that they would return to the war coverage. He was in the car, Annabelle said, and the car had no roof, and his head went blam, like when Daddy dropped the watermelon. Me and Elsie watched 14 times. Heidze, his mother said, where were your teachers? Around, Annabelle said, and then we went to the grassy knoll. That's where the video happened. Elsie told me she saw blood on the road. Elsie was Annabelle's new best friend. A day earlier, his sister had boasted about Elsie's dream to hurl herself from the monkey bar so she could break her arm and get a cast littered with drawings and signatures. His mother shushed her now as she'd shushed her then, but Annabelle pressed on. The head, she said. The head went blam, 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 all the way to China. Blam! She snapped the green beans in half. Blam! Then in fourths. Blam! Stop, his mother said. But Jack didn't know if she was talking about the JFK story or the green beans. Stop, what am I? Stop. Jack turned around from the couch. His father was draping a giant forearm around Annabelle's neck. He had Jack's sister pinned against the chair, his forearm pressing down on her throat as Annabelle's hands flailed in the air. His father grinned, and Annabelle laughed, and his mother laughed, and the TV commercial behind Jack laughed too. He should have laughed at the silly game his father and sister liked to play. His father brought his arm back to his side. He scratched his ass with his oven mitt. At his photography studio, he slung around long-nosed cameras heavier than babies, while at home, he sported an apron of Monet's water lilies, nearly small enough to serve as a bib. When he smiled, he shut his eyes, lost in some distant, pleasant thought. His mother laughed when she was happy and frowned when she was upset, but in the 5 years Jack had known his father, mannequins' faces had proven easier to read. You've got to be scarier, Annabelle said. It's in the eyes, Daddy. She stood up on her chair and, without warning, socked their father's belly. For every action, Jack had learned, there is an equal and opposite reaction. What would it feel like to punch his father in the stomach? When Annabelle tired of punching, she plopped back down with the flair of a wounded TV wrestler and plucked the end off a green bean. His mother told her not to put it in her mouth. His father returned to the kitchen, cracking his back on the way. His game was a success. For the time being, Annabelle had forgotten about John F. Kennedy's head. At Jack's school the next day, his safety was not a game. Preparing for a potential intruder was no laughing matter. Lock the classroom door. Close the blinds. Turn off the lights. Coach Becker, his health teacher in a demonstrative door locker, twisted the switch as if in slow motion, which led to a resounding, foreboding click, Push the desks against the door, Coach Becker said. Sit in the corner. Now. When Marco Martinez tittered, Coach Becker ordered him out into the open center of the classroom to do 35 push-ups. Jack looked on with the rest of the class without saying a word. Marco lived across the street and had beaten Jack in 16 straight games of Clue. But when it came to push-ups, there's no need to count. The boy weighed nearly 2 Jacks and couldn't get his hips off the ground. He heaved. His eyes pulled with sweat, implored Coach Becker for mercy. Kill me, he must have been thinking. I want to die. It was better that Marco wasn't allowed to say these words. When he got home, Jack told Annabelle about the drill. Guess what? We practiced hiding from school shooters. Marco Martinez barked. She ate his stories up with the serious fascination children reserve for adults crying in public or animals mating. Oh, I never saw a real shooter, she said. That's enough, their father said, herding them to the refrigerator for ice cream. Annabelle refused to sleep by herself again that night. To release herself to sleep was to allow Mama and Daddy to abandon her to a dark and dangerous world. One parent tucking her in was no longer enough. Her wailing reminded Jack of his first months in America when his father's nightmares had kept him awake. They lived in a 1-bedroom in East Plano then, an apartment half the size of his grandparents. Think of it like another plane ride, his mother told him. A means to an end, not a place to call home. But from the mattress in the living room, Jack could spy past the bent plastic of a window blind, switchgrass, taller than him. Beyond that, the illuminated sign of a dry cleaner that had been in business for more years than he'd been alive. There was a story in the loose spring by his foot, the stain under one corner of the mattress. A chapter he was living, even as his parents prepared for the next one. When his father sometimes yelled out from his parents' bedroom in the middle of the night, he did not utter a word in any language that Jack could understand. He could only hear his mother on the other side of the door pleading for him to stop. Now Jack left the door to his room open and listened as his mother assured Annabelle, the way she'd assured Jack in those first months, that there was nothing to see. Nothing under Annabelle's bed, nothing in the closet, nothing in the mirror, nothing in Daddy's hands, nothing in Daddy's head. Annabelle pecked a cheek that was nothing more than a surface for her lips to touch. She took a gulp of nothing air. When she finally stopped crying, there was no sound of footsteps shuffling back downstairs, no reason for his parents to take their leave. The only way Jack could imagine their bodies fitting on his sister's bed was with his mother's elbows prodding Annabelle and half of his father's body splayed over the side.
Thank you, Simon. That was great.
Wow. It's incredible.
Okay, next we have Janice Northerns. Janice is the author of the poetry collection Some Electric Hum from Lamar University Literary Press. Awards include a Brush Creek Foundation for the Arts residency, second place in Southwest Review's 2017 MAR Poetry Contest, and the Robert S. Newton Creative Writing Award from Texas Tech University. Welcome, Janice.
Thank you, Leah, and big shout out to Sawani for hosting this. It's really nice to get together virtually. We can't do it in person. I'm going to be sharing 5 poems from my new collection, Some Electric Hum. I thought I would start with a poem about teaching. I'm sure some of you listening are teachers. I taught for many years. I ended up at the college level, but before that I taught high school, and I also taught middle school, which was by far the hardest teaching job. And I really feel for everybody teaching right now, whether you're doing it remotely or hybrid or whatever, but even under normal circumstances, Weird things can happen in the classroom. This is a pretty recent poem, but it was written the first year I taught 7th grade, and that was in 2002. So that gives you a little context for the poem. My first teaching 7th grade English. We'd just invaded Iraq, and jingoism flooded limbic systems, though it thinned and faded by the back row, where Ernesto's head lolled in a weedy haze. The principal came for him on the day we were outside writing down all we saw and heard. We all see the world differently, I explained, as Ernesto was herded inside like a cow doomed to the kill chute at Sunflower Beef, where his parents worked nights. Back in class, I tried salvaging the time, talked power and language, swaying phrases. Poking at their boredom, I risked going too far, asked, the war, for instance, is it really connected to 9/11? My strategy worked too well, and Stevie shouted, let's nuke them. Rowdy choruses of, yeah, let's nuke them, jostled the calm. Taylor B jumped up on his desk. My dad has an AK-47, he yelled. All had opinions as talk of binge awakened ancient reptilian brains. All but Ernesto, who was down the hall, cuffs snapped shut around his snake-thin brown wrist. When I think back on that day, I marvel at the sudden eruption of primal bloodlust. Did any boy so quick to pick foreign fights sign up for a war or two? And what about Ernesto? Did he grow into those handcuffs, claim them as his own? I lost track of that class a year ago, all but Taylor B. I see him at Quick Stop or the hardware store now and then, see his trigger finger twitching in his pocket, muscle memory of a severed tail. His white boy swagger, concealed carry smile, the sure truth of no one coming for him. This next poem has as its inspiration several different things, but the primary inspiration is a photo that hangs in the museum of the small town in West Texas that I grew up near. The photo was taken during the 1950s oil boom, and Bob Hope, the celebrity Bob Hope, is in the picture, shaking the hand of a wildcatter. They had gone in partners on oil wells. Wildcatter in a dry county. Carnival pulled out last night, and glistening greased chili dog wrappers catch the Sunday morning light as the old man stumbles through good times tossed on the ground. He noses through dusty ticket stubs and Coke cups coated in tobacco spit, thrusting the silver rod of a metal detector before him like a hard-on or a crutch. The town's closed down for church. It's just him and this rattling dowser. Each tick speeds his heart along, though he knows bottle caps and dimes to be the likely fines. Last month, he stirred loose a gold chain, 24-karat filigree. No one to give it to, but the promise of a solid strike beats faintly on in the dirt. Once, his blood pumped strong as a 30-barrel-a-day well, back in the 50s, the oil boom. A wildcatter could sink a few thousand into the ground and have it come up covered in crude, the sweet stench spicing his nights with women and celebrity. A photo hangs in the local museum. Bob Hope shaking his hand, smiling, partners on 12 wells. Only one came in a gusher, but that was enough until the oil played out and his woman hightailed it with a man in Lucchese boots. 40 years later, the pump jacks and drilling rigs have given way to churches pumping out salvation on every corner. Members congregate at the DQ to pick apart the sermon as a Sunday sandstorm scours his skin. He limps back to his rented room at the Palomar, wipes the grime from a few coins and his face, searching for something worth saving. The aquifer's going dry too, and he thinks of all that water sucked into church baptistries, so much to wash away the sins of the world that he's left with not one tear to water down the grit. This next poem is also set in West Texas. We lived out in the middle of nowhere, and a little girl named Sylvia lived down the road from us. She is what we would back in the day call, I guess, white trash. I feel like I can say that since I'm white. But when she grew up a little bit and had a baby, she named the baby Little Buster. That was not a nickname. His legal name was first name Little, middle name Buster. But that's really the only funny thing about this poem. Sylvia. Sylvia was back home, grown at 16, married a year with the baby, we heard, though all we saw of him were snapshots of dark curls, fine solemn eyes. Pretty enough to be a girl, ain't he? Sylvia said of little Buster, named for his daddy. Hospital nurses put a bow in those dark curls, enraging Daddy Buster, but what did that matter when social services took the baby 5 months later anyway? Too much drinking and fighting, Sylvia's grandma sighed. Too much to raise a baby in that house. But the problem was not too much of anything, I guessed, remembering Sylvia at 10 on her grandma's porch, bare toes, stubbing dirt, drab as her hair, as she waited for her daddy under a scalding August sun. He finally showed, stirring dust in a rusted black Pontiac, smiling like he never left. But there beside him, his latest new wife, smoking a Lucky Strike, the fleshy web between her thumb and finger, crudely tattooed with some other man's initials. Sylvia's daddy pulled a present from the car, a chatty Cathy doll that talked, only this one didn't. Well, I found it on clearance at the Dixie Mart, he said, but it's still pretty as, and Sylvia held her breath, hoping just for a second he might say her name. But the new wife eyed him, said, it's time, and they slid back into cracked leather seats, leaving Sylvia holding that broken bargain doll in her arms, a little something to call her own. Next, I'm going to share the title poem from the book, Some Electric Hum. This poem is set in Liberal, Kansas, the little town in Southwest Kansas where I currently live. Southwest Kansas is flat and dry. It's a small town, and when you look around, it's not necessarily a place that you think would inspire poetry. So when my husband and I moved here about 20 years ago, I was really surprised to find that two well-known poets actually spent a good bit of time during their growing up years in Liberal. And those poets are William Stafford and B.H. Fairchild. This gave me great hope that maybe they had left some poetic inspiration for me, or that maybe there was actually something about the town itself that inspired poetry. There's a painting term in the first stanza, pentimento, which means layers of painting painted on top of each other. Some Electric Hum for William Stafford and B.H. Fairchild. In barren Southwest Kansas, hard-baked edge of the great American desert, natives brag on empty air, a sky stretching out for miles. What a shock to find instead these heavy layers, a dense pentimento streaked on sky's canvas, waiting to be revised. Stafford sensed it too, wrote of touching rock where Coronado walked, and that clanging armor sways as Stafford's words hang on the breeze. Fairchild later felt the charge of weighted air as he roamed Liberal streets, counting all doors, poems to be opened. Shop lathes sang to him and play for me still. Some electric hum lingers here, a multiplying pulse that sets us down on the corner of 2nd and Main, breathing in the same rearranged molecules, just in different years. The sky is so crowded with past vocabulary that storm clouds spill verbs in the dirt, poetry pooling underground in a space carved out by a drained aquifer. Overhead, stanzas glide on thermals, kite tails of ions and spondees shimmering in the heat. This space, masquerading as a mute Kansas stare, unfolds for me now an invitation to grab hold, grapple with words just west of the tongue. I catch the drift of remnants as they eddy and roll, at last coalescing into direction, a whisper on the wind, go. I'm going to close with a poem about my daughter. The poem was written about a time when she was 14, and it was the exact moment, and it was an exact moment, when I realized that not only was she growing up, but she was going to be a force to be reckoned with. Boys would come on horses for Danica. This is what I remember most about the night she was born, the surprise of her heat. Lying coiled naked on my slack belly, her live weight sizzled into mine, and 14 years now, she's burned right through me. Once lately, we sat in the car as she agonized over making an entrance, sure she was dressed wrong, afraid of being laughed at. I drove away, leaving her in pain so raw, it was mine all over again. But these scars are all incidental blisters, gotten only from being so close to her own tender searing until this evening. I pull back the curtain, see a palomino and a bay casually owning my lawn. 2 riders take in the house. One catches my eye through the glass and heat flares along my borders. He looks at me with a boy face, but there's this man hungriness about his limbs sliding down sweaty flanks. I wonder why boys and horses I've never seen are at my door. But it's her they've come for. She saunters out to talk, born knowing this would happen. When did she learn slinging back her head that way? Hair firing wild all around, so much blonde shrapnel. Body turned weapon. She looks like, oh God, she looks like boys would come on horses. After they've gone, there's a quick call to her best friend, and she suddenly, doesn't ask, announces they're going to the show. To meet those boys, she swears that isn't so, is hurt when I keep asking, and the past burns only a simmering echo in this first flash fire. I let her go and worry the whole time over the feel of him, even through glass and air. Much later, kneeling by her bed, I touch her skin, still hot as the night she was born. She whispers, so low it may be imagined. The boys weren't there. Her hair still splayed reckless against the pillow, but in glazed dreamlight, it seems more a pre-Raphaelite halo, making belief possible for seconds at a time. And I believe, not in words, but in a look that passes between us, scattering the shot around our hearts into ceasefire, at least for tonight. She understands now what I don't trust, the heat and something else she saw in my eyes. I breathe goodnight into the spent ammunition of her hair and leave, both of us knowing I would have done anything at 14 for boys who came on horses. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Janice. What part of West Texas were you from? Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
I grew up near Snyder, Texas, about an hour south of Lubbock.
Oh, okay. I went to high school in Clovis, New Mexico, which is about an hour and a half from Lubbock, just on the other side of the border.
Right across.
Yeah, yeah. You're bringing back those landscapes for me. Okay, our next reader is M.O. Walsh, who I have just learned we can also address as Neil. Well, welcome, Neil. M.O. Walsh is the author of the story collection, The Prospect of Magic, and the novels My Sunshine Away and The Big Door Prize, which is also just out, right? When did that?
September, I think that's when it was. Who knows?
Okay, so pretty recent, yeah. He currently directs the Creative Writing Workshop at the University of New Orleans and is a Swanee Writers Conference alum from 2006 and 2010. I don't know about that, Adam. I don't know about that apostrophe 10. I think you got to have the 20 with the 10. Anyway, we can debate that later during the Q&A. Welcome, Neil. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's his bio.
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm the one that did that, sorry. First, just so amazing just to hear all these other writers. It's been great. I have to say that last poem about the daughter really got with me. I have a 12-year-old daughter, and I'm torn like equally between like, you know, just holding her close and putting her in a catapult, you know? It's sort of like both feelings at the same time, all the time. You know, I know, so yeah, I do have a new book out, and I know I'm supposed to read from it, but this Sewanee thing feels me sort of called to do something else. I hope it's okay if I do that. And I'm looking at Adam. Adam, is it okay if I do a little something different? Okay. Honestly, I can't overstate how important Sewanee was to me. I was lucky to go twice, and the instruction and sort of inspiration I got there I can say without a doubt, put me on the path that I'm lucky to be on today. And so when I was thinking about reading for this, I wanted to do this, and it's going to be about my novel eventually. But I'm going to read something different, and it's like a little, I guess, personal essay, right? What do you call it? Short little thing. So now we have 4 genres, right? So that's good. This is like just a little fishing story, but I'm going to talk about how Sewanee sort of informed this. It's called In Our Lightning Past. The fish that saw us were not impressed. Who could blame them? We thought we were smart, my buddy Brock and me, a couple of writers in grad school skipping class to fish a place called Spring Lake. It sat along Highway 7 off a pale stretch of road between Oxford and Holly Springs, and it seemed nobody fished it but us. This was North Mississippi, circa 2004. I was near 30, still rocking a full head of hair, and just married. My buddy Brock was younger, maybe 25, but had already been married for a fifth of his life, and therefore looked as old as me in his way. We had our tackle and our poles and our beer in my boat, and had each hauled enough fish in our day to have stories, to have techniques, but we had never seen this. Just look at them, Brock said, and thumped a can of Skull with his finger. They're just staring at us. 2 big largemouth bass, hog legs we like to call them, sat floating beside our boat in plain sight. They were maybe a foot deep in the water and hovered next to a tangle of roots, both facing the same way as if expecting a bus. They looked close enough to shake hands with, and their exhibitionism unnerved us. Based on our previous experience at Spring Lake, which we'd fished nearly twice a week that past year, this felt to us like spotting a couple of yetis. I cast out a jig to see what would happen. It sank as quiet and quick as a dream, but the problem was that we could see it, just as clearly as we could see the fish that we were trying to catch. Nothing had ever looked as artificial to me as my bait in that moment. The black metal head, the gray wire skirt, green rubber tail, the red hook, it resembled neither the living nor the dead. I might as well have dropped in a radio. My cast missed the larger one by less than an inch, but neither fish bothered to move. No strike of hunger, no strike in self-defense, no flash of color as I hightailed for cover. They instead seemed preoccupied, almost philosophical, as if above this entire charade. Well, I said, this is atypical. On the map of our lives, we'd met in the middle, me and Brock. I'm from South Louisiana, he's from East Tennessee, so we were somewhat equidistant from home there in North Mississippi. Since our schoolmates were from places like Philly and New York, Brock and I bonded over our collective southernness, if that is a word. Yet we still had our differences. I was raised Catholic, he was raised Baptist. I was more swamp pop, he was more country. What this meant is that I would say, come on, man, let's have another drink, let's get tooted. And he would check his phone to see if his wife had texted him to go home and let the dog out or mow the lawn, and then say, nah, I probably shouldn't, but then have 6 more. All to say that we took different routes to the same destination, and we understood each other well. We were friends. I reeled in my line as Brock changed his lure. I don't know, buddy, he said. This might be a long day. I cast again. Well, maybe if I can just hit one in the mouth, I said. It'll sort of breathe it in. To understand my frustration with this water, you should know that where I grew up, you don't see what you've caught until it's landed. If you're in the salt or the marsh or the Gulf, the water is so often dark and choppy and large that you could pull any number of surprises, a speck or a red or a flounder, maybe even a turtle. You could pull up something ancient with teeth that you would still gut and fry if the size was right. Even our rivers and lakes, the water is so silted to the color of chocolate milk, you can't see what's going on down there. You likely don't want to know. Brock was used to clearer waters in Tennessee, sure, water you might even be tempted to drink, but rushing by him so fast in the creeks and streams that he'd waded, casting flies to land fish so handsome and sleek he couldn't help but release them. But this still water clarity was new to him too. His were the kind of fish you pull from swirls and take pictures of, not for their weight or ferocity, but for the way the sunlight glints off their skin like a prism, for the way they already look like a picture. We'd fished the bass of Spring Lake plenty that year, putting around every inch of it in my John boat, trolling across the big blank slate of its middle, pushing ourselves through the clusters of cypress and mangroves that edged its banks. We'd run buzz baits, flukes, and poppers. We dropped worms and jigs and more jigs. We'd rig Texas and Carolina and had what felt to us like plans for every occasion. But the lake appeared transformed to us since we last came across it. It had been purified in some way. And we poked around our brains for the reasons. Had there been rain lately? There had, we remembered, pouring rain, so maybe that was it. Enough rain to turn the lake to a bath. Brock stood up, took in the scene. Look over there, he said, and nodded toward a circle of trees. 3 more, he told me, hog legs too. I clicked on the small motor as Brock cast about and looked down into the lake as we trolled. I could see the bottom as clear as I could see my own hands. Every once in a while, though, I noticed a strange thing. A sliver of gold, it looked like. A toothpick set atop the gray dirt of the lake floor. I saw one and then another. I checked the other side of the boat and saw the same thing, 5 or 6 of them easy, some as long as a pencil, all of them sharpened to points and facing the same direction. Are you seeing this? Brock asked me. I clicked off the motor and stood, figuring maybe his line had gotten snagged in a tree, but he had stopped fishing altogether. In front of us now, a field of golden slivers. They were uniform in their arrangement, as if the outward rays of a sunken sun that we could not see. And the closer we got to the stand of cypress ahead, the denser they became. We passed fish standing so still beneath us that I could easily see the work of their gills. What the hell are they? Brock said, and I knew what he wanted. We were no longer looking for fish. I sat back at the motor and made it hum slow. We coasted like hunters over this new landscape beneath us, the brightening bottom of the lake bed, and found a path into the cluster of trees. God, man, Brock said, and we saw it. In the middle of the circle of trees, a cypress so gold as to dull all the colors around it. The top had been shorn off completely, relieved of its limbs and bark, and the remaining trunk stood as proud as a sword. At its base, the water looked as clear as new glass. Lightning, Brock said, and the probable past unfolded. In the night, perhaps, sometime that we were not looking, that we were not there, an explosion so powerful as to have killed anything that was. All of those golden slivers we now knew were not slivers, but splinters, arrows, darts that would have shot into our bodies like needles. The power of it, the awful beauty. We did not speak for a time, and we did not fish. Instead, we looked up at the neighboring trees where huge golden limbs sat snagged in the branches. Wood as large as human legs hung tangled above us, all glowing and undeniably new. We became amateur sleuths in our heads, wondering how long ago it could have happened, what it would have felt like to be there the moment it did, and how widespread the damage could be. We took the boat out of the trees and trolled circles around the point of impact. Another one over here, I said, and here. And the last one we saw finally more than 100 yards away from the strike. We traded scientific theories, me and Brock, our poles planked between the seats of the boat. What sort of velocity were we dealing with? What frightening speed? And then a strange notion we both heard in school long ago about how lightning actually starts on the ground. It is some sort of disagreement between positive and negative energy, we remembered, recognized by a passing storm and then corrected without discussion. What we had seen, we both knew, was a place where lightning began. When I think back about this now and the way we acted for the rest of that day, I wonder if the ghosts of those needles got in us. We left the lake and loaded the boat and took off down the road as if high. We guzzled beers and called up friends and retold the story to ourselves again and again. We went to the store and bought more beer, a bottle of bourbon, and thick as your fist steaks. We were going back to Brock's to eat well, by God, to drink heartily, to let the dog out, to pet him like we hadn't seen him in months. We were never going to sleep. And then the years went by. And Brock would find out about another man in his wife's life, and he would go on to find another love, and then another love after that one. And our professors would die or become famous, and our friends would write books and enter rehab and either birth or miscarry children. For my part, I would go on to stay married and raise children of my own, and after a year of noticing strange symptoms, find myself in a hospital room with my wife, as the doctor asks if she can feel what he is doing on her left side, as strongly as what he is doing on her right. And the answer she gives me with only a look, the sudden way that our steady lives would be rendered fragile and new, will blow me to bits. And I will be reminded of those golden splinters. The power, the awful beauty, the phrase itself, the place where lightning began, became and remains a refrain for me and Brock even now as we try to puzzle out the current state of our lives, how we got here, if we are happy, and what we can do to control that which is so obviously bigger than us. We still speak of it often on the phone, late at night, the pattern of gold on the lake bottom, the clarity of the water, the stunned fish floating reverent below. Yet what I remember most is this. We were young. We were friends. We were fishing. We had unknowable futures before us and had seen something on that day that no one else had seen. We were naive. We were unprepared. And though we had little money, we felt so tremendously grand, so thankful for what we had witnessed, for what it felt like we had somehow survived and could speak about, could even live on for a while if we had to, that when it came time to eat, we threw an extra steak on the grill for the dog. So I'm going to stop there. That's the essay. But the point is, I have this book out here called The Big Door Prize. This is based on a short story that I wrote a really long time ago when I was in grad school, not long, around the time that this essay was written, right? And I always felt like it could be something bigger, but I also recognized all I had was like a premise, and not really a story. And one time I remember I was at Sewanee, and it was, I think Diane Johnson was giving a craft talk. And she talked about this idea of the wound and the bow with artists, where basically like all artists, what they need to recognize is that they have some sort of deep wound in their past that they are trying to constantly wrap a bow around, right? Trying to constantly make pretty, right? And that's sort of like what the whole sort of gesture is, all the energy is going to that. And so with this essay, it was something, sort of off on the side that I did. And I thought it was going to be a fishing story. And then it ended up, to me, really becoming about what was going on with me and my wife at the time, and about, a lot of the issues that she was having, right? And so when I had this story for this, and I was like, man, I can't find a novel here. I can't find a story. All I have is a premise. And the premise, I'll tell you really quickly, is that there's a small town where there's a machine shows up in this town that says that it can analyze your DNA and tell you what your potential in life is, right? So, no matter what age you are, you've always been a teacher or something, and you go and you do this, and it can tell you, actually, you would have been really good, a really great swimmer, or you would have been really great at this, right? And so the whole idea of the premise of this novel is that these people are doing this and finding these new visions of their lives, and some are chasing them, some are hiding from them. And our main characters are a husband and wife, right? That get sort of very different, what they call readouts in the book, very different visions of themselves based on this machine. And so I always had a premise, but I never had the story. And then when I think of what happened for me at Sewanee, sitting in that craft class and hearing about the wound and the bow, and that what writers always need to be doing is sort of examining, what compels them to write, what the wound is, what they're trying to fix. I recognize that even when I was writing nonfiction, essays, no matter what I was writing at that time, it was about my wife. It was about these worries. And so I was able to bring that to this book, and it went from being a premise to being, I think, a novel that has characters in it that care about one another and that are, worried about one another, right? And so I know I'm supposed to read from the book, but I'll just say this. I think, after hearing everybody tonight, I think this will be the 4th best book you read this year. Okay, let's just say that. So if you're interested in it, it'll be the 4th best. But I can't overstate again how important Sewanee was to me.
Thank you so much, Neil. That was terrific. I remembered what I was going to say earlier, which was that at the end of these, I like to ask everybody to unmute. If you could take 1 second to do that so that we can do a round of applause and everybody can actually get a little auditory feedback. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. That was terrific from all four of you. So Gwen will moderate Q&A, and I will let her do her spiel about how you can ask questions.
Yes, all right. Gosh, that was wonderful. I feel like my brain is still just like processing all those things I just listened to. So we would love to have you participate in a Q&A. We have sort of two ways that you can ask questions. Either feel free to write a question into the chat, and I will, I'll say your name and I'll read the question for our writers. Or if you'd like to ask the question yourself via audio and video, go ahead and just raise your hand in the participants feature. So a little blue hand will come up next to your name, and then I'll call on you and you can unmute yourself and ask the question. And I guess as we wait for people to type out and think of their questions, I will maybe take the lead with the question I know Leah was going to suggest we ask as well, which is how are you writing about the current time and during the current time, if you are? And what does that look like right now? It's a tough time to write new material, I am finding.
I don't have a good answer for this, but can I tell a really funny story that I heard about this very thing, which is, I don't know, Simon, Janice, y'all are on Twitter and everything, right? This is something I saw on Twitter, but it was someone complaining because they had, just put a book out, and there was like, I don't know if it was Amazon or Goodreads review or whatever, which, we all always appreciate when they're good, but a review that was like, it's about a book that just came out this year. It's like, I was really enjoying this book, but then I realized like no one in the book was wearing masks. And I just have a hard time reading a book that's supposed to be set in contemporary America where no one's wearing masks. What do we do with that?
That's hilarious.
I mean, and who?
Yeah.
Can you just imagine? I mean, the writer's heart. I mean, that book was probably finished 2 years ago.
Right. And what's fascinating about that, I don't know if other people are having this experience, but there's this weird disconnect where like you watch TV, like we were watching Veep, and these, there's these political rallies where everyone's unmasked and hugging and shaking hands, and you just feel horrified. And then you sort of have to recalibrate. Oh yeah, that's not now. That's back when that seemed normal.
Yeah, I was working on a short story set in Nashville. Like, I didn't put a year on it, but there's like Uber drivers, and I mean it's very contemporary, but now it's like it's historical fiction or something.
Maskless fiction is now speculative fiction.
Yeah.
Well, we have a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Unless any of our other writers want to jump in about the joys of writing during the pandemic. But Jeff has a very specific question for Simon, which Simon, you can answer or not if you want to. It says, after the reviews you've received from the New York Times and Time Magazine, have you received any questions or offers about film and TV rights?
I actually I don't know if I can answer that question, but I haven't really, like, I will say that it's not like, I will say that my book is one that I think is not going to make a Hollywood blockbuster or anything. It's a quiet domestic novel that's very much in the interiority. So I wasn't expecting anything, but I was pleasantly surprised. So I don't know, maybe something will come out of it, but I think that in general, these things you may get an option, and then it will, will just like hang in that ether for a long time, and then nothing will happen. So, but yeah, it's exciting though. Yeah, thank you for that question.
All right, so Simon's book soon is going to be an HBO miniseries. That's going to be that.
Okay, I mean, can we just ask him? Can we? Sorry. Can we ask him what it was like to open up the New York Times and read a review of your book? I mean, what was that like?
Well, I don't think it's on in print yet, but
Okay.
but yeah, it's I just got I knew that there was going to be a review out, and I was so freaking nervous. I at some it was through an email. My publicist just sent me an email, and there was like an exclamation mark in the subject. So I was like, oh thank God, there's an exclamation mark. That must be good. And so yeah, overall I was happy with the review, but it's it's a large platform to either be praised or to be ridiculed, or so there's it's both exciting but terrifying at the same time.
All right, well, we have a question for Neil from Janice, actually. Do you plan to turn the essay you read into a full-length memoir?
Oh, no, no, not at all. It was a sort of just a little one-off thing. But I mean, I guess my whole point of that was it just reminded me that you just got to keep writing and, like trying new things, and like you end up realizing what it is that you really want to write about. I mean, I wasn't really necessarily writing about, when I was going to my fiction, sometimes you feel like you put a different hat on for fiction. It's like, I got to be doing this. But then if you're writing essays too, or you're, even I try to write terrible songs sometimes, right? You try as much as you can. And as long as you're trying, you'll recognize, I think, hopefully, that, man, I keep circling around this same material, right? That's apparently where the heat is for me right now, for whatever reason. And so, no, that was just sort of a one-off experience that I do remember, like it was yesterday. I mean, I don't know if I did a good job in the essay of describing it, but seeing a tree that had been recently just absolutely blown to bits by lightning was incredible. It was like one of those things that you're lucky enough to like be with someone else when you recognize it, where you feel energy between even the two of you. It's like, we're seeing something. I mean, it must have happened just like not that long ago, before. But it was just type of thing. I was like, okay, I want to write about that experience. And I recognize, okay, I should be writing about lightning, but here I go back to my wife again. Here I go back to where my heart is. Here I go back to this. Eventually you got to recognize there's magnets, and not try to deny them, but sort of lean into them. And so I took a lot of that and brought it to the novel in terms of, one aspect of the relationship of the main characters in the novel is with that. That was the point I was trying to make. And I wouldn't have ever put that together without Swannies. That's what I meant. But thanks for the question, Janice.
Thank you. That was a wonderful essay. Anyone else have any questions? This is your big moment.
I have lots of questions. Darcy, I have a question for you. So I'm lucky enough to work at a university where we teach playwriting. We have an MFA in playwriting, right? And so I love hearing your thing, because I'm around playwrights and all the time. How do you think playwriting is adapting or going to react to this sort of current situation where you can't be sitting next to someone in a theater? Some of my students have thought it's actually a great thing in the way that they're handling it, and some are worried. So what's your thoughts?
Yeah, that's such a big question. I mean, one of the things I keep coming back to is this random fact I learned at the beginning of the pandemic, which is that after the flu of 1918, when Broadway had to shut down, when they opened, they did better than they'd ever done before. So, in terms of comeback, I think, people crave this sort of in-person interaction. They want to kind of be in the room with everybody else. So I think once it's time, it'll be good. And for now, I think it's just, what theater is at the heart is just connection, right? It's just figuring out how we make that connection, kind of however that's possible. So, I think while we have to take a break, we rest, we figure out new ways of making theater accessible, which is really exciting. And then we come back, and hopefully the work that we come back with is even more relevant and conversation provoking. Maybe I answered.
And actually, Darcy, we have... No, you did. That was great. And we have another question for you in the chat, Darcy. Denise Sedman would like to know, have you finished writing your whole play? And how long does it take you to write a play?
Yeah, thank you. The obnoxious answer is your whole life, but the realistic answer is, the realistic answer is also your whole life. But this one is 150 pages. It's one of my longest plays, and it took me from start to finish of a first draft about a year. But they can kind of be all over the place, so I guess your mileage may vary. But yeah, some folks I know can write a couple plays a year, which is really astounding. I am usually lucky to kind of finish one a year, but yeah. And I have finished this one. It's very early.
Thank you, Darcy.
Sure.
Leona Sevick has a question for Janice. How do your children react to your poems about them?
That's a great question. I really haven't gotten any negative feedback from them at all. They're both adults now, but even when I wrote the poem, my daughter, Janica, the one that I read, she was 14. She liked it even then. I think she's just excited to, it's like, oh, somebody wrote a poem about me, even if it was mom. So they seem perfectly okay with it. They've read all the poems in the book that are about them, and I didn't get any complaints. I mean, we didn't get any fights over it. So I think they're okay with it.
Simon, Denise Sedman would like to know how autobiographical your book is.
Yeah, well, I think I think that's something I like about fiction, is that I'm able to like put like parts of myself in all the characters, and also like parts of my imagined selves, So like, for example, I like Jack, the boy in the novel, I was born in Tianjin, but unlike Jack, I moved to Texas in America when I was 1. Jack in this book grew up with his grandparents for the first 6 years of his life, and had to sort of carry this these formative years of his life without his parents. And he had to sort of meet his parents again when he went to America. That was supposed to be my journey, I guess. And like the story goes, my family, which I think is a little bit exaggerated because like of logistics, but that my dad last minute, decided, no, like Simon has to come with us, even though he's going to be an incredible burden on us during our first years, and we probably can't afford to have him. But I did end up going, basically, growing up in Texas, and but I was always a little kind of curious, like what that alternative version of my life might be, and how that would like feel to sort of at some point think of your parents as strangers. And a lot of that emotional territory is in the book, but as far as plot stuff in the book, I mean, almost none of it is from my life. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, that was just absolutely splendid. If we don't have any other questions, I think that's it. But that was just, I enjoyed that enormously.
Yeah, that was terrific. Thank you so much. And Darcy, I am desperate for live theater. Once it's back, I'm going to everything. Season tickets to every theater in Cincinnati.
Great. I can't wait to see you.
Yeah.
Thank y'all for hosting us. It was awesome to hear everybody and meet everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much for
Yeah.
being here.
It was great.
Thanks everyone for coming, and
So much.
great to hear everyone's readings.
The next one is December 17th, right, Gwen?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think we're going to keep these going. So look for them in the spring. And we're even toying with the idea of keeping them going once we actually can meet in person again, because obviously not everyone can meet in person every summer, and it's a nice way to keep these connections going.
And so we all get to travel to Swanee for those, right? Once you start doing that.
Of course.
Okay, just making sure we're all taken care of there. All right.
Yeah, we'll send buses out.
I'll organize it all. There won't be any more work for me. Don't even worry about it.
All right, thank you, everybody.